Hello, and welcome to Findmypast Remembrance Day live webinar. My name is Alex Cox, and I'm pleased to be introducing today's broadcast titled Unpicking the Past, Revealing Secrets in Old Military Photographs, hosted by our very own military records expert, Mr. Paul Nixon. Over the next 40 minutes or so, Paul will be demonstrating how you can use old military photographs to turn detective by identifying important details that you can then use to track down military records and historic newspaper articles related to your ancestors' military career. We'll be taking questions throughout, so please don't hesitate to pop any you might have in the box at the side of the screen, and we'll try our best to get through as many as we can. Depending on how we do for time, Paul will also try and answer a few in person at the end of his talk. Don't forget that an on-demand version will be sent to you in the next few days, so don't worry if you miss anything, as you'll be able to watch this again as many times as you like. That's enough from me. I'll now hand you over to Paul. We really hope you enjoy today's webinar and come away feeling truly inspired to start investigating your family's military past. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Alex. Good afternoon, everybody. What a fitting day this is to be doing this webinar. I'm very pleased to be doing it. I will say straight away, I don't consider myself an expert in military photographs. I'm extremely interested in them, and I learn things more about them every single day. And I just want to share some of my insights with you all. And hopefully I'm right on most of what I'm saying, but I will I'll hold my hands up that there are experts out there who are far more experienced than I am, and I will give you some tips as we go through. But anyway, let's get on with it. So this is the best time that you have as well to look at military records free of charge on Findmypast. We now have all the 70 million military records free on Findmypast over the next few days, finishing on Sunday. So now is the time to go and check those records. So I'm going to start off by just talking about some of the tools of the trade. I mean, I'm old school, and these photos here that you can see are some of the books on my shelves at home, and I've built up a collection of books over the years. And to be honest, as I say, I'm old school. There are plenty of books online now, but I still don't think you can beat the reference of having being able to pull a manual off the shelf, pull a book off the shelf close at hand. And there's plenty of books out there which will prove extremely useful in helping to identify uniforms, identify badges, cap badges, collar badges, you name it. But as well as the books, I would recommend these three resources which have just popped up. So the Great War Forum is the place to go for information on the First World War, and you'll find experts there on uniform and on regiments and on all sorts. The Victorian Wars Forum, similar experts on Victorian Wars, going up to the Boer War. And finally, Soldiers of the Queen. I just find this website fascinating. I don't know the chap who founded it, started it, and adds to it, but I do admire him, and I envy his collection of military photographs. I think they're superb. I've used a couple in the slides that follow, and I'll note those when we come to them. But for the most part, all the photos that you will see in the slides that follow are from my own collection, and most of those acquired in the last 12 months. Probably in the last 3 months, for that matter, for the majority. One of the good advantages is that they're very easily available. You can buy them on a very well-known internet auction site, beginning with E and ending in Y, and they're still reasonably priced. Let's keep going. Right, next slide. So tools of the trade part 2. Again, a magnifying glass, and the item on the right is what's called a linen tester. That's used in the print trade. Always used to be anyway. You use that to gauge the number of dots on a piece of print. I just find it very useful because it folds up and you can slip it into your pocket, and if you're going to antique fairs, you can just take it out and examine the photos in great detail. And there's very good magnification on that. Similarly, if you are scanning photos, I would recommend you scan to a high resolution. So the photo on the left is from my collection. It's a man in the Gloucestershire regiment, and you can see I've scanned that document. I scanned that to 600 dpi on the photocopier, and you can pick out there the shoulder title. You can see GLO on that, GLOS just about, and if you looked at the other side, the title on the other side, you pick out the DER for the remaining letters for Gloucester, and you can see the Sphinx there as well. So that identifies him as Gloucestershire Regiment. And look at the bottom there, you've got the location taken in Bristol. So he's Gloucestershire Regiment, probably at the regimental depot. A quick word about cabinet cards and CDVs. These are terms that are used almost interchangeably, but they are very different. The cabinet card on the left is larger than the CDV on the right. The CDVs actually predate cabinet cards. They started in around 1854, in wide usage from 1859, and then the cabinet cards come in around 1870. But they were both used at the same time, as you can see here. So both these photos I bought at separate times on that well-known internet site from the same vendor. Thankfully, I managed to spot that the man in the photo on the left was the same man in the photo on the right that I bought a few weeks earlier, so I was able to keep the photos together. I always find that quite irritating when people do this. They sell things at different times, and then you have to try and keep the things together. But anyway, I was successful in doing that. But just to make the point that the card on the right is a CDV. It's a good deal smaller than the one on the left. So what are we looking for? I'm just going to click a bit here because there's various things you can look for. I'm just using this photo as an example. We will be looking at uniform. The uniforms changed over the years, the different styles of uniform, the styles of jackets, the patterns of uniform changed a lot, and I will go into more detail on this later on. But I've just put some arrows on this particular photo. So collar badges, or collar dogs, as they're known, accoutrements. I mean by that the webbing or the belts. This is a Slade Wallace belt that this man is wearing. The jacket pattern, he's wearing a 7-button red tunic. Cloth badges. The cloth badges, I'm using that as a general term, but it covers trade badges, proficiency badges, in this case a good conduct stripe, badges of rank as well. I've put trouser pattern stripes there. I mean, sometimes you will see a soldier, you won't necessarily know which regiment he's from, but if you look at the trousers, the artillery and the engineers had a thick stripe running down the trouser, a red stripe, whereas the infantry had a thin stripe. So that will be a clue as to whether the man you're looking at is infantry or artillery. Cap style, so cap again, I use that in the loosest term, Glengarry, bonnet, call it what you will. Badges on top on the headgear as well, which identify the regiment. And of course, don't forget the colours, the facings of the uniforms. I mean, this man is Leinster Regiment, which is classed as an Irish regiment, of course, but classed as a Royal Regiment. So the facings, the colours on the cuffs and the collars are blue, royal blue. Other regiments, English regiments, are white facings, and we'll come to this a bit later on as well. Look again at the photographer and location. If it's on a cabinet card or carte de visite, look for the clues there in the bottom. So this is W.H. Jacob, who has a studio at Sandgate and Hythe. Now at Hythe there was a musketry school, so did this man attend the musketry school? Quite possibly he did. And then finally, don't forget to check the back of the photograph. It's quite frustrating that many photos do not have details of the subject, and why would they? If I took a photo of myself now and sent it to a friend or to my family, they would know it was me, so why would I put my name on it? And that's exactly what happened when these military photos were taken. But occasionally you will see the photo annotated on the reverse, and that can be very helpful. So I'm just going to, having asked those questions on the previous slide, I'm just going to answer them as well. So this particular pattern of uniform is 1881 to 1902. 1881, the Cardwell reforms come in. This is when the regiments of foot become county regiments, and the cuffs are known as jam pot cuffs. They're very easy to distinguish. You can't see it so well on this particular man because he's Royal Regiment, so the blue is blending in with the red. You won't necessarily know that either from a black and white photo, and again that's a frustration today that you can't pick out the colours, but he is wearing a red jacket with blue cuffs and blue trousers with a thin red stripe. you'll have to take my word for it. He has a good conduct chevron on his lower left sleeve, which indicates he's been in the army for 2 years at least and has had an unblemished career to date. Those good conduct chevrons, though, could be lost just as easily, usually for drunkenness, but then could be reinstated afterwards. But seeing a man with a good conduct chevron will tell you he's been in the army for a couple of years. The badges here are, the collar dogs are for the Leinster Regiment, which I mentioned. The cap badge is on there as well for the same regiment. He has the Slade Wallace belt, which I mentioned earlier as well. There you have, as I say, W.H. Jacob in Hythe. Blue facings, and there was nothing on the back of that particular photo, but as I say, he possibly was attending a musketry course. So all these photos are from the same period. They're showing 3 different regiments. So the King's Royal Rifle Corps on the left, their uniform was green with scarlet facings. They and the Rifle Brigade had very distinct uniforms apart from the other line regiments. The man in the middle is Lincolnshire, so there you can see the jam-pot cuffs quite clearly. So he's got white cuffs, white collars, badges on the collars, blue red jacket, blue trousers. And then the man on the far right is Royal Sussex Regiment. Again, that's a Royal Regiment, so anything with a Royal in the title, they're going to be blue facings, blue cuffs, blue collars. So just to reiterate, now the photo on the right is one from the Soldiers of the Queen website. So this is a colorized photo which has been done after the event, but it just does show you how the uniforms would have looked. So Royal Regiments have blue facings. English and Welsh line infantry have mostly white facings, not all. The buffs, the East Kent were known as the buffs because their facings were buff. And the Middlesex would latterly have yellow facings. So it's not by any means true to say that they all were white. They weren't. Scottish regiments have yellow facings. Irish regiments have green facings, except for those which are Royal Regiments. So in practice, that meant that all the Irish regiments, except the Connaught Rangers, had blue. You had the Royal Irish, the Royal Inniskilling Fusiliers, the Royal Dublin Fusiliers, etc. And then the Rifle Brigade, green, black, and the KRRC were green and scarlet. So here's a nice photo. I bought this. I think this was about £10, which was a bargain as far as I was concerned. And it says at the bottom, Shropshire Regiment on board SS Malta. But in fact, when you look at the photo, there's a good deal more than just the Shropshire Light Infantry there. I've found at least 4 different regiments there, and I'll take you through some of the examples here. So this arrow here, this does point to a man in the Shropshire Light Infantry, King's Shropshire Light Infantry. So that's a Royal Regiment, so that's blue facings, blue collars, blue cuffs. Then here you have Rifle Brigade in the Rifle Green, and the East Lancashire Regiment. And then in the middle, a couple of Northumberland Fusiliers. And I'll show you why I know that. So here's a blow-up of the Northumberland Fusiliers and the Rifle Brigade man that you can see. You won't necessarily see here on this particular shot, but take it from me, it's true. On his collar, on his shoulder straps, and on others as well, you can see the RB there. On these men, you can see NF for Northumberland Fusiliers, and you can see the bursting grenade on their collars. This man here, again, has a good conduct chevron, so he's been in the army for at least 2 years. Jam-pot cuff, which indicates that the photo was taken between 1881 and 1902. And on the left, tantalizingly, you've got Pearson's Weekly. Now, I've tried to scan this at the highest possible resolution to just go in and catch the date on that, but I just can't see the date. But Pearson's Weekly was first published in 1890 by Arthur Pearson, who's later Sir Arthur Pearson, who would go on to found St Dunstan. So straight away, we've reduced our window of 1881 to 1902 to 1890 to 1902. I wondered actually whether these men are on their way as part of the Ashanti expedition. At least 3 of those regiments were involved in that, and I wonder, that was 1896, so it's possible they were taking part in that particular expedition. Here's some more detail from that same photo. East Lancashire Regiment on the left, you can see that from his collar badge. He's also got a drum, which is a proficiency badge on his sleeve there, so he's in the band, drummer. This man standing up has got 2 chevrons there. So the first chevron for 2 years, the next chevron is another 3 years, so he's had at least 5 years service in the army. This man's a Lance Corporal, you can tell that by his stripe. And I'm afraid this man has not been invited to the party, which is why he's looking through the porthole. Right, so what I've done here, we're back to our Loyal North Lancashire men on the left-hand side, and also Loyal North Lancashire on the right-hand side. But the photo on the right is later. It's the pattern of uniform from 1902 to 1913. So just pause there, look at the cuffs. Look at the cuffs on the left. You've got the jam pot cuffs, 1881 to 1902. On the right, you've got a different style. You've got the V-shaped cuff, and that's 1902 to 1913. There are also other points to note, and as I say, never take anything for granted. Everything is on the uniform for a reason, and you can work out time scales from different patterns of uniform, from different styles of uniform. So those shoulder tabs, which have white piping around the edge, you won't find that on the earlier photos with the earlier pattern clothing from 1881 to 1902. So anyway, here we go. Collar badges, same collar badge on both photos. I say same, there will be variations in that collar badge as well, but it's broadly the same. Cross swords for this man, that indicates he's an instructor, a gymnastics instructor, and he's a sergeant, so he's a sergeant instructor. This man is a marksman, he's got crossed rifles above his 2 chevrons there, so that man again has been in the army for 5 years or more. There you go, jam pot cuffs, as I say, pointed cuffs. And the thin red stripe on the left-hand side, on the photo, you can see a stripe on the man who's sitting on his right leg. You can see the stripe running down his leg, and you can see it very clearly in the illustration as well. Also look for campaign medals to date a photo. So in the illustration on the right, that man is wearing medals from the Boer War. He's got the Queen South Africa medal and the King South Africa medal, so that must date it to after the Boer War, so that's 1902 onwards. I just call this slide A Tale of Two Sergeants. They're Royal Sussex Regiment, both men are Royal Sussex Regiment, but taken at completely different points in time. So the man on the left, jam pot cuffs, 1881 to 1902, Royal Sussex, so blue facings, which is why you can barely distinguish where the cuff ends and the tunic begins. Red sash, they're both wearing a red sash as a sergeant. So that photo on the left dates to between 1881 and 1902, whereas the one on the right is later, 1902 to 1913. You've got those, it won't be jam pot cuffs actually, I put jam pot cuffs there, ignore that, that'll be a different patterned cuff. But the white piping is later, it's 1902 to 1913, and in 1913 those shoulder straps changed to pure white. You didn't have the piping at all, they were just white straps. So the 1st Royal Sussex Regiment was stationed in Rawalpindi in India between 1911 and 1913, which is probably when that photo dates to, because at the bottom it says Rawalpindi and Murray, that's Murray Hills. So here's another photo, which was a recent acquisition, and I've spent hours on this photo. It's proven to be a very entertaining diversion. What it is, it's members of the 1st Dorset Battalion, 1st Volunteer Battalion Dorset Regiment in the late 1890s, and helpfully some of these men have been identified. Now, I don't know whether that text is contemporary, whether it was added when the photo was taken or whether it was added sometime later. But I'm going to go through here. There's quite a bit of annotation on here, but I'll try and get through it. So in the middle, it says Major Rolf Pope. Major Rolf Pope was from the Eldridge Pope brewing family, and I found him in census returns on Findmypast in 1891, 1901, and 1939. 1939 register, of course, is not a census, but it's a register. He didn't serve in the First World War, but he was an active member of this particular volunteer organisation. The volunteer force, of course, became the territorial force in 1908. And he was obviously the lord of the manor. He was a very well-to-do man. Eldridge Pope, of course, is still going strong in Dorset, in Dorchester. On the right, it says there, Mr. Gregory, ex-Dorset, 21 years, gunnery storeman at Company Headquarters, Princes Street. And I found a pension record for this man in WO97 on Findmypast. His declared age was 20 in 1873, but he was actually born a few years earlier than that, and he was discharged in 1894. So this is what I mean. Is the text on the right written after the photo was taken, or written about the same time? Because it says ex Dorset there, so that suggests obviously when that photo was taken, the photo must be after 1894. This man in the middle, he's Sergeant Harris, and it says Head Gardener, Borough Gardens. So again, looking at the records we have on Findmypast, 1891 he appears as a nurseryman. In 1901 census, he appears as a corporation gardener living at the Borough Garden House on Cornwall Road in Dorchester. And in terms of what he's got on his sleeves, he's got 6 stars on his right sleeve. I'll come to this a bit later in some of the other shots, but each star represents 5 years service in the volunteer force. So 6 there, 6 5's 30. That's the number of years he's served in the volunteer force. His rank in that photo is colour sergeant. There's the arrow just coming. You can see the stars there at the bottom. And that other arrow is crossed rifles for marksmanship qualification. And there's his badges of rank on his upper right sleeve. This note simply says Bellinger. In fact, I didn't even understand what it said first of all, but looking through contemporary newspaper reports, it soon became clear that it must be Bellinger. George Bellinger was a butcher. He wears a crown above his crossed rifles in this photo, which means that he was the best shot in the company. And if you look at newspaper reports, in the Bridport and Dorset Times, I think that was the name of the publication, there are no end of reports on this particular volunteer battalion and rifle competitions. And these names that appear on my photo, which was bought for under £5, a complete bargain, they appear time and time and time again. It was a revelation to find all this information. So Bellinger was certainly in the company shooting team between 1890 and 95. This man on the right, he's simply indicated as a Mr. Smith photographer, and again, more research on Findmypast and on the internet generally. Actually, I found a photograph with H.R. Smith, Dorchester, there at the bottom. That's his company logo, I guess. But he also served in the Boer War. So this photo is pre-Boer War, but he served as a volunteer. The volunteers volunteered to serve with the regular forces in South Africa, and he served for a year in South Africa and earned himself a medal. So I mean, this slide is quite wordy. All the other slides are not, as you've seen. But there are 16 men in the photograph, 10 of whom wear uniform. At least 5 of those men have got a marksman's badge on their left sleeve. The colour sergeant on the far left wears cloth shoulder titles, which if you focus in, you can see the particular unit, which was the 1st Dorsetshire Volunteer Battalion. And then, as I say, newspapers, a search of Dorset newspapers reveals numerous references to shooting matches with all the names there. So on that little extract there, I've got Colour Sergeant Harris, Lieutenant Pope is there, Private Smith is there, and so on and so forth, Lance Corporal Bellinger. And as you go through these newspapers over the years, you see Lance Corporal Bellinger become a corporal and a sergeant latterly, I think. I think the photo probably dates to between 1896 and 1900. Ralph Pope's only a lieutenant in the extract, and the Borough Gardens, where Sergeant Harris was a head gardener, didn't open until 1896. That's search on the internet. That's simple research. And Charles Gregory had completed his service by 1894. So I think it's probably the latter 1890s. The one thing I've not found is where it says Burkham Prize, and I presume that's probably a shooting prize which was won by this particular company, which is C Company of the 1st Volunteer Battalion. So using newspaper reports, it's possible to suggest names of potential members of this shooting team. So there they are again. It's a glorious photo. As I say, 10 men have got rifles and they're posing that typical Victorian pose. They're all looking in different directions. But there are obviously men there. The Lieutenant Rolf Pope and Smith on the right are members of the same unit, but they're not in uniform, and the same is probably true of the other men who are not in uniform as well. So moving on, here's a couple of photos again. Both these photos bought at different times. It's the same man, bought from the same vendor, sold at different times, thankfully reunited by me again. But you see this man, both taken by the same photographer in Madurai in southern India. On the left he's wearing khaki, and on the right he's wearing the white uniform. This is walking out uniform worn on parades, etc. Frank Richards in Old Soldier Saab, which I highly recommend if you want an idea of the British Army in India at the turn of the century, wrote, "On the plains in the winter we wore the thin, fine Indian khaki by day. During the heat of summer on the plains, we always wore white on parades." And there you have this man, the sergeant, wearing the khaki and wearing the white. Now, of course, there were different patterns of white dress, different patterns of khaki. The collar here is the original uncomfortable collar fastened by hooks at the top. But you'll see shortly in another photo that I'm going to show you, there's different collar on some of the men in that photo. You can't really see on this photo, or certainly not in the shot I've shown you here, the badge, the regiment. But if you were to zoom in on the helmet on the right, you can make out the Sphinx, which is a Lincolnshire regiment. Now here's a better example. Another man wearing the whites of India, and I've just focused in on the helmet here. You can see that prancing horse. That's the King's Liverpool Regiment in the tropics. So again, with these photos, look for the props. You'll often find there's a photo. There's a helmet to the left. It might be on a chair, on a cabinet, might be on the floor. Look for those props. Look for the badges. Look for the collar badges. Look for the shoulder titles. Here's another favourite of mine. I've called this 5th Oxfordshire Light Infantry. It became the Ox and Bucks Light Infantry in October 1908, but I'm pretty sure this photo was taken almost on creation of the territorial force in April 1908. So I think it's the Oxfordshire Light Infantry. I might be wrong. It might be the Ox and Bucks by this stage. But there's some good photos. This was sent to me by somebody in America who was going to wanted to dispose of it, didn't have a home for it, so she sent me this, and also a certificate which was issued to one of the men here. I don't know which man. It was his certificate on being discharged from the volunteer force. So he'd served with this battalion's predecessor, was discharged, and then went straight in and joined this particular regiment. So again, on here we have efficiency stars, which we saw that on Sergeant Harris on the last photo, but they were dark, so more difficult to pick out. But here you have them. You can see those men wearing the stars, and again, the same thing. Each star represents 5 years' service. So this is service in the volunteer force. The fact these men are wearing metal shoulder titles rather than cloth ones indicates that they're territorial force and not volunteer force. And that's the badge of the Oxfordshire Light Infantry. Here again, some more badges. This man's got the ribbon of the QSA, so presumably he was served as either with a regular regiment or maybe as a volunteer, part of a volunteer service company. He's a colour sergeant instructor. He's got the 3-bar chevrons and crossed rifles and crown on his right arm above the elbow, which indicates that that's his rank. Again, you can see the shoulder title on this man here, and his rank is colour sergeant. And the man in the middle, who only looks about 14, is the officer. He's second lieutenant. This man is a signaller. That's why he's got the cross flags on his lower left arm. Meanwhile, overseas, this is a photo, one of several photos that I bought along with the man's medals and the medals for his son. The man served with the 1st Battalion, Queen's Royal West Surrey Regiment. I think that on the right-hand side you've got a football team for the Queens, and I think the man in question is the man who's in the first row in the middle, seated with his arms, well, they've all got their arms crossed, but in the middle. I've found him in other photos as well. I'm pretty sure it's him. But anyway, the point of this particular photo showing you this is more clues in it. So 2 football teams. And if you zoom in on those footballs, you can see on the left-hand side HMS Perseus 1909, and on the right it says Detachment the Queen's 1909. We know that the Queen's Regiment was in Aden in 1909. That makes sense if there's a ship there as well. So it all makes perfect sense. But it enables you to date when the Queens were in this particular location. And again, another clue here. I mean, it says at the bottom, number 4 section, D Company, the Queen's Regiment Doolally, so we know they're in India. But if you wanted confirmation of that, focus in on the drum, and there you can see on the drum it says the Queen's Royal West Surrey Regiment. So again, look for these clues. Drums, football matches. I don't think I've seen a military photo of a football team where somebody's not scrawled the name of the regiment or the date on the football. So they're well worth looking at and focusing in on. And that's why you need this, the magnifying glass or the linen tester or that high resolution scan, because you're looking at details which are small on the original and you're focusing in. You want to try and pick out exactly what it says. This photo is the same from the same collection that I bought. This is again 1st Queen's Regiment, this time in India. The medals they're wearing are not campaign medals, they're Temperance medals. Frank Richards, my favourite from Old Soldier Saab, referred to these men as indulging in unnatural behaviour. To him, not drinking was anathema. But anyway, these men were proud exponents of temperance, and they wear their badges proudly on their chests. So these 2 hardened cases in the middle are gymnastics instructors. You can see that again by the crossed swords there. They've got collar badges for the Queens. The illustration that's just flown up is a cap badge rather than the collar badge, but I just use that to illustrate that it's the lamb and flag. That's the Queens. He's sergeant instructor in gymnastics. And he's got 9 years of abstention. Now, the way these badges work, and again you can find reference on the internet, the way he's organised it starts bottom right, so the cross there is 6 months no drinking, and then it goes moves one to the left. So you've got 1 year no drinking, then 2 years, and so on and so forth. And the final badge is for 9 years. He's got a marksman's badge on his lower left sleeve. These men don't wear good conduct chevrons. It doesn't mean they're didn't have good conduct. It simply means that their rank, they were expected to be of good conduct anyway, so there was no need for them to have the good conduct chevrons. USA Medal ribbon, Queen South Africa Medal, Boer War. And this man's a corporal instructor of gymnastics. He's got 2 stripes, so he's a corporal. Moving on, same group, different men. This man's got some interesting badges. This one's the S enclosed within a wreath is a scout, and he's a marksman as well. He's got cross rifles. He's also got 2 chevrons below. And the star on his right sleeve is a distance judging badge. And the other man on the far right, he's a lance corporal, signals instructor. The signalling badge is above his corporal stripe, or lance corporal rather. And again, a marksman. In fact, 5 of the men in this particular image have got good conduct badges. You can see them there. And there's the Temperance medals. I think this illustration was probably taken from the Dix Noonan website, which is a very good website, medal auctioneers, good for reference for medals. And there you can see the badges at the top. So I would compare these particular badges with the ones on the photograph to identify what they look like, how many years they represented, the ribbon colours, etc. So having mentioned different reference sources so far, here's some more to bear in mind and to look out for. These postcards are fairly commonly available online. They were produced by a company called Tuck. They're known as oilettes, and that's the style of the card. And they were photographs, colorized photographs of men taken wearing the 1902 to 1913 pattern uniform. And very good illustrations. So you can see there the man on the left, the Northumberland Fusiliers, their facings are green, gosling green. So you can see that just about on the cuff that it's green. The jacket is red, the collar is green. In the middle you've got the Scots Guards. They're called Scotch Guards there, but it's Scots Guards. And on the right, English Line Regiment, Sherwood Foresters, white facings, and there he is in all his glory. Another reference here, postcards, Gale and Polden, series of cards. I just use those arrows on the left to indicate the thicker red stripe down the trouser leg rather than the thin. That's the Garrison Artillery and the Engineers. They would have both had thick red stripes on their blue trousers. A couple more photos, which I've illustrated because, again, they've got crossed guns on their sleeves, both these men. One has a crown above the guns and another has a star above the guns, and that's because those particular troops or batteries were awarded prizes. So the first prize was the crown, the second prize was the star, and that was awarded to all the men in that particular troop or battery. That's why they wear that. Both men are wearing walking out dress, albeit they've got different patterns of tunic, and these badges were awarded from 1898, which again dates the photos quite nicely. So again, another recent acquisition and another period in time. So on this photo, I've just put things to look out for. Regimental insignia. You've got 7 men there, all different regiments. So you'd look for the regimental insignia on the cap badges, the shoulders, the kilts. Look for the uniform pattern. Look for the good conduct chevrons. Again, the man on the far right standing has 1 chevron. The seated man on the right has 2. So 2 years and 5 years service respectively. Gillet arms badges and badges of rank. And again, photographic clues. Coincidentally, and I only realised this when I was putting these slides together, this is also taken by Jacob of Sandgate and Hythe, which is where the musketry courses were run. They were run in Hythe, and these are men on a musketry course. So this is a good photo. I like this photo. Royal Sussex Regiment again, but this man's wearing the Broderick cap, which was very unpopular amongst the troops. It was actually worn between 1902 and 1907, but more widely between 1902 and 1905. The British troops thought the cap made them look like Germans, and they weren't happy wearing it. It was very unpopular, and it was discontinued. But you can see very clearly on here the cap badge of the Royal Sussex Regiment. You can see the pattern of the sleeve, and you can also see this man's medal. So he's got the Queen South Africa medal with 3 clasps. So that of course dates the photo very nicely as well. A bit later now, Territorial Force Royal Field Artillery. These men are wearing an Imperial Service badge, which means they've volunteered for overseas service, because of course the TF, the Territorial Force, was only ever intended for home service, but if they volunteered for overseas service, they were entitled to wear that Imperial Service badge. And you can see that on the breasts, on the right breasts of a number of the men in that photo. The man there at the back, with his insignia, tells me he's Battery Sergeant Major. Now, I've put Master Gunner 3rd Class. Again, you know, as I say, I'm not an expert on uniforms. I'd like to be more of an expert than I am. I'm still interested, still learning. I have an idea it's Master Gunner 3rd Class. In the infantry, he'd be a colour sergeant, but if anybody knows better, please tell me. Kilts, sporrans, bonnets. Again, very Scottish military uniform, and understanding it is a topic in its own right. Look for the different badges on the sporrans. Look for the different types of sporrans, whether it's the number of tassels, how the sporran is put together, the pattern of the kilt. Of course, the badges on the bonnets as well. They will all signify a particular regiment. So we're moving through up to Kitchener Blues now. So the Kitchener recruits, of course, well known that when men volunteered for service in 1914, uniforms were not available and had to hurriedly be pulled out of cupboards or commissioned, and you had men wearing what was called Kitchener Blue uniforms, and these 2 men are both in Kitchener Blues, albeit different patterns again. So the man on the left is in the earlier pattern Kitchener Blue, whereas the man on the right is in a slightly better fitting pattern of jacket, of tunic, and he's got pockets there. There's 4 pockets on his particular pattern, but they're both Kitchener's men. The photo on the right is November 1914, the one on the left will be slightly earlier. And again, I mean, this webinar has not necessarily concentrated on First War or Second War, and we're coming to the end of the slides now. There's 2 or 3 left. Perhaps in future, if there's sufficient enthusiasm, then I'll do one more targeted at First War and Second War. But this is 1908 pattern webbing for infantrymen. And it very much is webbing. You can see on the left that illustration is from the Imperial War Museum. The photo on the right is not my photo. I'm not sure where that comes from. No copyright infringement intended, but it's a good photo of a man wearing that 1908 pattern. And this is a slightly later pattern, 1914 pattern webbing. Again, not my photos. Leather straps, more uncomfortable than the 1908 pattern webbing, but this was. You'll see both these patterns of webbing in First World War photos. And finally, just to finish off, here's a way to impress your family, your nearest and dearest, this Remembrance Sunday when you're watching the parade at the Cenotaph. So identifying the foot guards. I mean, of course, there are many ways of identifying the foot guards, looking at the badges, looking at the cap badges, the collar badges. But if you look at the tunics, you can also identify which regiment is which. So 5 regiments of foot guards, and they are The most senior one is the Grenadiers. Then you have the Coldstreams, who are the second. Then the Scots Guards, the third. The fourth ones are the Irish Guards, and the fifth are the Welsh Guards. And that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is reflected in their buttons, the way the buttons are worn on their tunics. So Grenadiers, number 1, the most senior Foot Guards regiment, they wear their buttons evenly spaced, equally spaced. The Coldstreams, number 2 in seniority, wear their buttons in pairs. So you can see the man on the right, 2 buttons in a gap, then 2 more buttons. Scots Guards, third most senior regiment, wear their buttons in 3s. And these pairs and trios that are reflected on the sleeves as well. So if you look at the Coldstreams, you'll see on his sleeve he's wearing 2 pairs of 2. The fourth most senior regiment is the Irish Guards, formed in 1900. They wear their buttons in 4s. And you've guessed it, the Welsh Guards, 100 years old last year, they wear their buttons in groups of 5. So there you have it. You're an instant expert in identifying Guards regiments. Have a look at when you watch the ceremony at the Cenotaph on Sunday and spot those Guards regiments. That's it from me. Thank you for listening. I hope it's been entertaining. It's just been a very quick look through uniforms. It hasn't really concentrated on officers. There's a lot more that can be said, but anyway, it's a start, and I hope you found it interesting. I'll hand you back to Alex.
Brilliant, thanks Paul. Yeah, that was really fascinating and a great excuse to look at all those amazing pictures as well. You've certainly been keeping us busy. We've had loads of questions through. We've tried our best to get through as many as possible. Some of them have been really tricky as well, and we have picked out a few here that we can put to Paul in person, and I will start off with this question from Beryl Wakefield. Thanks, Beryl. And Beryl has asked, if a soldier transferred to another regiment and was given a new number, would his old number from his first regiment be issued a second time and given to another soldier who then joined or was transferred to his original regiment? Quite a mouthful, but here you go, Paul.
Thank you, Beryl. No, the answer is no. The regiment, the number would not be reused. If a man transferred, or if he finished his time with the regiment and walked around the block and then re-enlisted, he would not be given that number again. So, and that number would not be reused. But, I mean, do bear in mind, of course, that regiments had different regimental number sequences. And in fact, I have a blog about regimental numbers myself. But let's take a typical regiment. Let's take the Essex Regiment. The 1st and 2nd battalions of the Essex Regiment used numbers from a single series. The 3rd Militia Battalion and the 4th Militia Battalion each had separate number series. And then the Territorial Force Battalions, again, each had separate number series. When the First World War started, the service battalions that were formed drew numbers from the series that had been used by the regular battalions. But it did mean that you could have, just in that Essex Regiment, for instance, half a dozen men with the same number, because all the series would have started from 1. It is confusing. It does confuse people. But the fact of the matter is, battalions had multiple number series, or regiments operated multiple number series. But if a man left the regiment, that number was not reused, was not to be reissued. Another number would have been given to the next man.
Great, and we've got another one here from Gerald Allen. This is quite an interesting one, actually. Gerald said, photographs of my grandfather from World War I show him in a London regiment. In photos, he carries a pair of leather gauntlets. Does this indicate any particular job or role? I think I might know the answer to this, but I'll pass it over to Paul anyway.
Thank you. I don't know, Alex. I'm interested in your answer on that one. Well, it must do. Possibly a driver. Maybe a dispatch driver, a motorcyclist. I'm not sure. I'd be interested to see the photo actually, but I offhand I'm not sure. What do you reckon, Alex? You're googling leather gauntlets, British Army, aren't you?
I thought I had it, but I was.
Don't know. But have a look at Google it online, and as I say, there are some extremely knowledgeable people on forums. So go to the Great War Forum and Google on the Great War Forum. I'm sure somebody there would know. Perhaps post the photo as well, and you'll identify the regiment. Of course, the London Regiment had multiple battalions as well. So So yes, my recommendation would be to do that. Have a look online generally first. If you can't find the answer, then go to one of the expert resources like the Great War Forum in this case.
Yeah, I was remembering some documentaries I saw ages ago, and they were saying there was one position in certain regiments where they were allowed to grow a beard, and I think it was like a lot, they almost like wood clearing and lots of heavy. I can't, the name escapes me, but yeah, I did not know the answer. I was wrong. So we've got one here from Georgina Spurgeon, and Georgina's asked, does the National Archives have any individual military photos, or would these be held by the regiments?
Thank you, Georgina. People seeking photos is such a common request. Typically, photos were not taken when a man attested. A man might have photos taken in a studio when he was in uniform. Photos might be taken by colleagues, overseas. Group photos if you were sergeants or if they were officers. There might be some official photos then. But broadly speaking, no, I don't think. I think you'll be very lucky to find photos. It's worth trying, I would say, the Imperial War Museum. It's worth contacting Regimental Archives. But I would also recommend, and I've done this myself in my own research, set up your own blog, set up your own mini website. It's very easy to do, very cheap to do. It can only be, might even just be a one-page website. Set up the website, put as much information on about your man, and let the search engines do the rest. Let people come to you rather than you try and go to them. And you never know, somebody might turn up with a photo. It has happened to me in many cases when I was researching a place called Chailey in Sussex, and I've posted lists of all the men who served, and I've been contacted over the years by people who've got photos and have been adding photos to those biographies. So it does happen, but it can be a slow process. There's no guarantee of success. I just think you've got to cross all the boxes. I think probably the National Archives is the least likely source of photos for you, though. I would say possibly Imperial War Museum, National Army Museum at a push might be the best. But as I said earlier in the presentation, you'll find lots of photos with no identifying names on them at all. Back to Alex.
Great. So we'll get another question up. This one is from Daphne Hanam, and Daphne has asked, this is an opinion question, Paul. What are your thoughts on touching up old photos? Would you ever touch up photos yourself, or do you think it's best leave them in their original condition?
Yeah, good question. I think if the photo's badly damaged, and you can get somebody to do it and to make it look to enhance the features that have been lost, then I think that's not a bad thing. Of course, you still have the original. You'll still have that, whatever you decide to do to the photo. So you'll have the original, then you'll have a digital copy which has been altered, amended, call it what you will. But I don't think it's a bad thing. I don't necessarily. I've not done it myself. I would consider having photos colorized. There are some very clever people out there who are able to colorize photos, and if you know the color of a uniform, which there's plenty of reference out there of original uniforms, that could be done quite easily. Of course, the things like eye color, hair color, they're subjective, but I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with it. I'm sure there are purists out there who would say no, would never do that. But personally, I think why not? I think they could probably make nice gifts as well, for that matter. I'm actually considering that myself. So yeah, go for it.
Great, and here we've got another one from Jenny Kingsbury, and this is actually quite a top tips kind of question, I guess. So Jenny has a large photo of a group of men, obviously in an army, sitting and standing on an ice boat. It was in her grandfather's collection of photos, and she's not sure whether it's from the First or Second World War. What kind of advice would you give for immediate clues you could spot?
Thank you, Alex. Again, I would be looking at the uniform, looking at the uniform pattern. Generally, you can tell from the look and feel of a photo whether it's First War or later than First War. If you know the uniform or know the regiments, then you can check where the regiment was at any given point in time. There used to be a very good site called regiments.org, which is sadly long deceased, but that would have told you exactly where a regiment was at any given point in time. But again, if you know the regiment, then Google that regiment, and there's probably a forum. Again, Victorian Wars forum, perhaps. Great War forum, perhaps, might have the answer. I think in these circumstances, seek opinions, and that's why forums are so good, because you will find people there. People certainly not backward in coming forward, often with opinions, and the forums are what they are. But I think there are some experts there who might well be able to provide good assistance to you on this particular topic. So I would say open it up to a wider audience. Tell people everything that you know about that particular image. If there's anything on the back of it, a bit about the man, when it could have been taken, and then see what comes back.
Great, and here we have another one from Sandra Taylor. Thank you, Sandra. And Sandra has asked, how would you go about identifying someone who was serving with the Royal Army Medical Corps in a World War I era photo?
Look for the badge online. It's quite a distinctive badge. So once you know what the cap badge looks like, then you've got a point of reference, and then look for that same badge in a photo. Ideally, if the man's wearing a cap, you will find that there are shoulder titles. There'll be RAMC on a shoulder title, if you can see that as well. You may find a cloth badge with a cross on it, like the Red Cross. That again is RAMC. So again, do some background work. Type into Google Royal Army Medical Corps First World War uniform or badge, and see what comes up. Look at the results and then compare that with the photo you've got. I mean, one thing I like doing, as I say, I don't consider myself an expert. I consider myself still learning. But what I do like to do is to try and find out as much as I can about a regiment, a photo, and then I'll look at some similar queries on a forum and look at the photo and think, okay, this is what I think about this photo. I think that because he's wearing this particular uniform, it was taken at this date and this, that, and the other. And then I just go through and see what the experts have said and say, oh, okay, yeah, I got that one right, or I got that wrong, and this is why I got it wrong. So, yeah, just do some background, and if you need to, go back to the forums.
Great, and looking at the time, there is the chance this might be the last question we can squeeze in, but we'll see how we get on. And this one is from Linda Andrews, and Linda has asked, her grandfather, John Powell, was in the Army Service Corps during World War One. As far as they know, he worked with horses and served in France and Gallipoli. He was apparently awarded the Silver Spurs, but they don't know what for. Do you have any ideas? I think it's a tricky one, isn't it?
It is a tricky one, yeah. I'm not even sure what that is, actually, the Silver Spurs. But, I mean, presumably you've checked on Findmypast, found the medal card, checked to see if there's a service record. There is a very good book by Michael Young on the history of the Army Service Corps from 1902 to 1913 to 1918, I think. I've got it at home, and he's just published a new book on Army Service Corps photos, which is taken from postcards from around the same period. So I would suggest looking at those books for clues. He is the authorised expert on Army Service Corps. So Michael Young, as I say, that first book is now out of print and costly to buy. The second one has just been published by Pen and Sword, and is I reviewed it earlier this year. It is a very good book and easily available.
And yes, I think we can squeeze one more in, the last one. Don't want to leave anyone behind. The final question is from John Littlefield, and this should be quite a nice, straightforward one, I think. John has asked, where would be a good source for World War I photos for the Royal Artillery, and is it possible for people to get hold of copies themselves?
Good source of photos for Royal Artillery. Well, the Royal Artillery was a huge corps, of course, and so there are thousands of photos. I'm just trying to think of a reference source. You will find plenty of reference on online auction sites. I mean, that's easy, and they're not difficult to come by. Firepower Museum was the Royal Artillery Museum, which is now closed. That was based in Woolwich in the old Royal Artillery Barracks, but that's now closed. So again, if you have a specific query about Royal Artillery, first of all a Google search and then a forum question if needs be. But if you're simply looking to build up a Royal Artillery imagery and photographs, there's a stack of images online. There's one thing that is not in short supply, and that's military photos from all eras. If anything, actually, the Second World War photos are less common to come by than the photos from the First World War and Victorian era.
Great. So that's a wrap, I think. Thank you very, very much for joining us, and thank you, Paul, for that fascinating talk. We hope this enables you to go home and look at your own military photographs and make some fascinating discoveries. If it does, please by all means let us know, because we always love hearing about your discoveries. And also, because we haven't done too many live webinars in the past, it's a bit of a departure from the ordinary, let us know how you found today, what you thought of it, and yeah, have a fantastic weekend, and we hope you join us next time. Bye.